Well, elsewhere, for many in the Middle East, it was a very different passage into 2024. Israelis marked the new year to the sound of air raid sirens after Hamas militants fired rockets out of Gaza. And Palestinian civilians in the narrow territory saw little hope for a better year, as Israel's military said that it was planning for a long war to eradicate Hamas after its October 7th terror attack against Israel.
At the stroke of midnight, a barrage of rockets and flares light up the sky over Gaza. Sirens activate as Hamas fires a new wave of rockets, intercepted over Tel Aviv. A new year brings no respite for both sides. Palestinians displaced in the Mawasi camp say there is nothing left to celebrate.
My tragedy lives inside me. The outside world does not feel it at all. Let them have their celebrations and leave me to live my tragedy.
But many still hope their wishes for 2024 can somehow become reality. They dream of one day returning to their homes and mourning all they've lost. I lost my son, my son-in-law, the most precious people. How will I receive the new year? My wish is to return to visit their graves, retrieve the bodies under the rubble. This is my wish for 2024. Earlier in the day, as Israeli troops carried out more raids in Gaza, the Israeli military announced some of its own plans for 2024. Israel said thousands of reservists will be allowed a temporary return to civilian life.
Some of the reservist soldiers will return to their families and their jobs this week. This will allow a significant relief for the economy and will allow them to gather strength ahead of the coming activities in the next year. And the fighting will continue, and we will need them. These adjustments are meant to ensure planning and preparation for the rest of 2024.
A clear signal that Israel is in this for the long haul.
Correspondent Tania Krämer is standing by in Jerusalem. So, Tania, we've heard that Hamas has fired several rockets at Israel last night. Bring us up to date.
Well, this is what happened just at midnight. A massive rocket barrage came out of Gaza towards southern Israel, but also towards central Israel, including Tel Aviv, where the air raid sirens went off and people had to take shelter. So it shows that 3 months into the war, Hamas militants are still capable of launching such rockets, although there have been less rockets, according to the Israeli military, in the past couple of weeks. At the same time, the military also said that it's continuing its ground operations and air strikes across the Gaza Strip at this point.
Meantime, Israel's far-right finance minister has called for Palestinians to leave Gaza and make way for Israelis who could, and I'm quoting him here, make the desert bloom. Tell us more about how that statement is being received.
Well, that's right. These were comments made in an interview by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's far-right coalition partner, Bezalel Smotrich. He is finance minister. He also holds a portfolio in the defense ministry. He is part of the wider security cabinet, not of the decision-making smaller so-called war cabinet. He basically said that Israel should encourage residents from Gaza to leave Gaza and also to resettle Gaza. Now, Israel was in Gaza with its own settlements until up to 2005, when it then withdrew its settlements. It later put a closure on Gaza when Hamas seized power there in 2007, largely controlling what went in and out of Gaza for the past 16 years. Now, of course, these statements are of very much concern, great concern for Palestinians, but also for other Arab nations, watching very closely what are the plans and scenarios put forward by Israel. They're not shared by most of the security establishment, and also they're at odds with what positions suggestions put forward and ideas put forward by Israel's main ally, the United States. We're expecting US Secretary of State Antony Blinken coming this week, and we're expecting more discussions on what will post-war Gaza look like.
DW correspondent Tania Krämer, thank you.
Let's pick up some of those points with Frank Ledwidge. He's a former UK military intelligence officer who now lectures in strategic studies at the UK's Portsmouth University. He joins us from Oxford. Welcome back to DW, Frank. This point about Israel's war in Gaza covering the whole of 2024, if it does last that long, what are the likely consequences for the region?
Good morning, Phil. Happy New Year. There's no doubt at all that this war, at whatever scale of intensity, will last throughout this year and probably the years afterwards. And this is something I think that's concerning the IDF, the Israeli army, very much. Not only them, of course, also jumping over the political level of Israel, the United States, because there's no clear idea of what form the rest of the war or the rest of the conflict in Gaza will take. At the moment, we have no idea what the political track will be. And of course, from a military perspective, the army wants to, or the IDF want to know that so that they can shape operations to lead up to it, what they call phase 4. There's no sign of that. And at that political level, it's very clear there's a great deal of exasperation on the part of the US and specifically President Biden with Netanyahu with respect to getting some answers on that. So coming back to the point of a long war, there's no doubt there will be a long war in Gaza. It may well take years. The nature of the war so far has made it almost certain that there will be some form of insurgency afterwards. The question is, will the Israelis have responsibility at the civilian administration level, which raises other issues? And then, of course, and this is an entirely separate, possibly even more serious matter, what will Israel do about Hezbollah in the north? Israeli ministers have made statements concerning, well, we're going to solve all our problems. Well, if that's the case and they want to do that militarily, that raises a whole new box of problems, to put it mildly.
OK, so many things in there. Just to pick up on one of the points you made there, why are there these difficulties in getting word from Israel's government about how this war will progress for the next year? Why is it difficult for America to get that information?
I would suspect that there are disputes in the Israeli government as to how this is going to be done. They're under pressure now from the army leadership for answers. What will, as they call it, phase 4 look like? Now, phase 1 are the initial assaults. Phase 2 is where we're in now. That's the fighting phase. Phase 3 they're moving into, or they say they are transitioning, winding down intensity. And phase 4 is what happens afterwards, as the military say, the day after. The British and Americans had this huge problem in Iraq, which doomed the campaign. And the Israeli military are very concerned they don't make the same mistake. And clearly they're finding it very difficult to get answers from the government as to what the day after will and should look like. And of course, they need to plan for that now. Who knows what's going on inside the Israeli government? They're under pressure from the Americans on various levels, very little leverage being applied. Okay. But that's the problem. And it's becoming a real problem, I think, within the war-fighting decision makers.
Right. Meanwhile, what we have seen is Israel withdrawing some of its reservists from the Gaza Strip. So what does that tell us strategically?
OK, what that tells us is that the Israelis are, in fact, moving from phase 2, which, as I said, is the high-intensity phase. And these are normal military, I say normal, these are the terms used in military campaigns of this kind. So we're moving from phase 2, the high intensity, as the Israelis said they would, into phase 3, which is winding down into the longer term. So the brigades that are coming out, there are 5 brigades. Brigades about 3,000 people, depending on its role. And there are 5 of them coming out, so it's a fraction of the force in Gaza already. These are training brigades. So what they want to do is put those, they're all reservists, they're going to be put back into society, and they may well be redeployed. And it's just the mechanisms by which the army functions. It's called roulement. The likelihood is at some point they'll be replaced, or they'll be pushed back in, or perhaps even redeployed.
OK, so it's all part of the cycle. And finally, the US Navy says it sunk several Yemeni Houthi rebel boats in the Red Sea, killing some of the crew. Briefly, how concerning is this when we talk about regional contagion?
Well, that is regional contagion. It's extremely concerning. We're looking at bringing Iran into a much wider regional war involving not just the US and Iran and, of course, Israel, but indeed European powers as well, Britain included.
Thank you for that, Frank. Eminently concise.